Good evening, sir.
Good evening,
Welcome.
sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Now, welcome to this first cases of high spin. My first request is to everyone to switch off their audio. If their bandwidth is good enough, they can be seeable. But audio, there will be a lot of disturbances from others outside around the house. So except the speaker, I request others to mute themselves. Now, as I already informed earlier, today's topic is about analytics in governance. Why Subramanyam? Now first I will read from the introduction that is given by Mallika to me. Why Subramanyam has been a serial entrepreneur with over 30 years of expertise in ICT. He is currently the MD and CEO of Next Health Digital Solutions, and that company focuses on healthcare. As a tech advisor to ASCII, he has provided digital transformation strategies, enabled business process re-engineering and capacity building. He managed very large-scale projects in India and abroad. He works closely with governments, agencies, and other countries. Having been associated with various government projects over decades, his observation is that there is a significant need to understand the relevance of analytics in the government. Analytics, as broadly understood, has been a decision support tool in the non-governmental space and has been the key decision enabler. However, such a tool set has not been deeply explored in governance for a multitude of reasons. This discussion today focuses on the relevance of such a framework for governments and the technological elements that need to be brought into the governance. This discussion also focuses on some of the learnings both in governmental and non-governmental contexts. That is, this is not just for any government, it is for governance. Now, this I have read from whatever Mallika has given me. In addition to that, I will also say a couple of things. One is I know Subbu for more than 30 years. We worked together in CMC, a golden era of CMC from 93 to 98, 99. And the second thing is, he is a great singer. Anytime Subbu comes to my mind, the first thing that comes to my mind is his singing and his governance, his being MD of co-options, all other things. They just come to my mind a fraction of a second later. Now, without a lot of further hammering from my side, I hand over the mic to Subbu. I request everyone to keep themselves muted. Whenever they have any question, they can raise the hand. We will have enough opportunity for all questions to be answered by Subbu. Over to Subbu. Thank you for accepting our invitation, sir. Please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, please. You are.
Yeah, sure. Let me just pull out my screen. I'm a little, give me just 30 seconds. I will pull out my screen and then I want to. Right, share screen. Yeah, I think this is the one. Share. Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Can you
yes.
hear me?
Yes. Both. We can hear you. We can see the screen.
Right. There we go. Got it. All right. Just thought, like this is, thank you so much for inviting me over for this conversation with all of you. Primarily, I just wanted to, share with you all whatever little that I have understood over the last couple of decades in governance. And when Mallika said that I should be speaking on something, I was just wondering what is it that I could speak on. So then I said, okay, let's look at relevance of analytics in governance. And I was trying to put all my thoughts together over the last week, and then I said, okay, let me just see if I can construct a presentation around this. So thank you so much, Gandhi Garu. Thanks, Mallika, for giving me this opportunity. So let me dive into the topic. So just there, this is what I would like to share with you all. Analytics, the larger canvas, analytics yesterday and today, evolution of technology in governance, impact on governance, need of analytics in governance, analytics for impact analysis in Q&A. You can ask me questions even in between, but then it's very, very open conversation based interaction that I would like to have. Let's not be very formal about this. Kindly, you can stop me at any point and you can ask whatever questions that you have in your mind. So let me just start with the first slide. It says from data to information, from information to intelligence, from intelligence to insights, from insights to intuition, and from intuition to wisdom. Yep. I just want to ask Gandhi Garu, Prakash Rao Garu, you see, some two pictures there. Can you relate to these two pictures?
It beats me.
Anybody? I mean, I'm just taking your names because I'm able to see the list out there. So anybody can answer this, question. There are just two pictures out there.
It appears to be a neural network.
Yeah. What about the other one?
That is a cosmos.
Yeah. So it's interestingly that these two pictures have a lot in common. They have a lot in common. To start with, we are talking about the threads and the dotted lines that you see in the neural network are to be replaced by the forces that are binding the cosmos. And the thinking that is binding the mind, and the thinking and the knowledge that is binding the universe seem to be, very similar, very, very similar. So when I talk about anything in the space of analytics, I usually try to, go through these 5 stages: from data to information, information to intelligence, intelligence to insight, insights to intuition, and intuition to wisdom. So when you take the last step from intuition to wisdom, we get almost spiritual in nature or probably philosophical in nature. From insights to intuition, we tend to get, beyond the human mind. From intelligence to insights is where we are right now trying to look at, see how we can bring out insights about how things can be brought together for certain consequences that we would like to play around. So if you look into analytics per se for me is a very, very interesting area of work. And not only that, it is very deeply, profoundly philosophical for me. The reason why I say that is this, that whenever we are talking about things like intuition, things like insight, even a simple definition like intelligence, it's important to understand why we need these. And there's a lot of work that we have been doing over the last 3 decades, in several projects, in several contexts. And one thing that I have been observing is that the role of intelligence, the role of programmatic methods by which we can approach the problem of intelligence and insight is very, very, very interesting. And I think today's session essentially brings about these. And the thing that I try to do is that just recap a few concepts, very simple way, because I think all of us know what is analytics about. It is beaten to death. But then just being in the context once again, trying to get to see the definitions and, see, okay, this is what it could mean, and draw the contours of our conversation. I thought we would just start with it and then get into a lot more detail. I also feel that probably I'm just collecting all the thoughts together rather than I really contributing something unique and new to the conversation. Let me see. This is my humble effort to present the ideas that we have been working on. Okay, so let's start with the first piece here. So analytics, the larger canvas, if you've seen, it has gone through multiple iterations of what it could be, right? We talk about descriptive analytics, we talk about diagnostic analytics, we talk about predictive analytics, we talk about prescriptive analytics. And I really like those really very, very small sentences which summarize what they are. Like descriptive analytics talks about how many, when, where, and what using reporting structures. So descriptive analytics more or less forms the basis for anything that we want to talk about in analytics. In the absence of descriptive analytics, I don't think there is much we can do because the primary data set actually emanates from the descriptive analytics. And then, of course, we go to the next kind of analytics that we are talking about, which is the diagnostics analytics. Why something occurred. And typically, we have been using these for all kinds of alerts, drill downs, and different tools that we have been putting. Even in descriptive analytics, when you're talking about the report structures, most of the descriptive analytics was about, fixed format reporting, where the data is always given, and an old function of what we call MIS, which you pull the data in a particular format, you report in a particular format. So you say, in this format, when the data flows in, what do you do? How do you go about, and so on and so forth. Now, when we are talking about diagnostics, we just go a step little closer and try to say if there is any relationship between the when, where, what, to, how, and, what's the consequence? Is there any, is there something that we need to be aware of? This kind of, next step of questions that come in. And that's the reason why we have used a lot of alerts as a method to address the diagnostics based analytics for quite some time. And slowly from there on, we also moved to predictive analytics. Predictive analytics is not something that we have discovered it now. I think subjects that are very fundamental core subjects like physics and a lot of modeling that we have done using statistical methods, stochastic, non-stochastic methods that were used, all of them had an element of, the predictive analytics that we were talking about. And then slowly we started looking at multiple data sets and seeing if there is something that you can derive out of these, and looking at the causation using predictive and statistical models. So to identify trends, to identify correlations, causation, which is fairly a lot more complex thing than just correlation. And then finally, we move to the prescriptive analytics, where we are saying, if we were to have a situation X, what would be the best action that I can take? And I am lot more prepared as to where I would want to go. So this seems to be the way in which the analytics per se has moved. And now today we are talking about using very profound and deep learning methods to understand the prescriptive analytics framework. There's a lot of research that's going on, and there are lots of findings that we see now. And more interestingly, all of them are trying to answer different aspects of predictive analytics as well as the limitations of both descriptive and diagnostic analytics. Let me just take a minute here and say what I mean by this. In many cases, when we're talking about prescriptive analytics, particularly which is data-centric, there has been this demand for a lot of data to be available, a lot of data sets to be made available, and the volume of large data, big data, all these things have been a very, very important part of the prescriptive analytics in the early stage. But now, because of the advanced nature of both machine learning methods and deep learning methods, what is happening is that the data size is coming down, but then the ability to infer through complex models is coming out. And I think one of the areas where we are really, finding it very interesting, particularly in the AI/ML space with the LLMs, that I think is the area where things are moving very rapidly in the analytics space. And then if this is where it is moving, I think one major thing that we have been observing is that this is a very interesting observation that we have been going through over decades. That is convergence of knowledge. So what do I mean by convergence of knowledge? So when something in mathematics happens, something in statistics happens, when something in silicon chip happens, and when something in neural networks happens, when something in biological sciences happens, chemistry, and they all converge in a particular time, you suddenly realize there is a new context into which the entire paradigm of problem solving comes into. It's very interesting to see that. Let's say, for example, when we talk about 1920s, transistor technology was there. The moment circuits came in, and the moment Boolean mathematics, which was otherwise available in the 1880s, suddenly found its logic circuits becoming true. And eventually, the breakthrough that we have got into is the big time computing, which is what we are talking. And in a span of probably another 30, 40 years, you are hit by the next big revolution where we are bringing in telecommunication into it. And then you found internet taking over. And you see that there is always convergence of multiple technologies that are coming in. And this convergence has impacted not only industry, but also government. The industry picked up the cues much faster because it has a profit motto, whereas the governments or the governance took its time to understand its relevance. It is still taking time to figure it out. And that's where we see there is a very potential space of the relevance of analytics, where we need to understand how businesses are looking at themselves and how governance can look at itself, learning from the businesses. After all, governance is also one form of business, if not for profit, but it is certainly for a certain level of transformation, which is what is the promise of a governance. So let me just get to the interesting trending. You see the trending that we have seen in analytics, isn't it? From a very bare bone descriptive analytics, we are talking about prescriptive analytics. The movement is quite obvious. Now let's take a look at this. This is a very, very interesting evolution of technology adoption into governance. So you see that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. At this point in time, when I was preparing this slide, I've had a very interesting thought, which I thought I should share with all of you. During the 1980s, there was a great futurologist. His name was Alvin Toffler. Alvin Toffler wrote a book by name the Future Shock. That was a book which essentially talked about how there is the what we call the industrial revolution as the new industrial revolution, or industrial revolution which has had its impact, and how technology is going to play its role. And this is, mind you, in 1980s that he wrote about it. And he takes a few pieces of reference even to Isaac Asimov's thought about how robots will play a role in our lives. And this is just 40, 50 years back. Somebody looked into the future and he said, these are all the changes that are going to happen. And then right in, I think in 85, if I'm not wrong, if I'm quoting him right, it was what he wrote, the book called The Third Wave. And what he means by that is that wave after wave after wave, the technologies keep changing how we are going to live on the planet and what is its impact. And you can see that exactly happening using technology in governance. I remember in 1990, the golden era where, just then technology started becoming ubiquitous. And in 1985 to 90, the desktops have started moving into the various segments of the society, be it banks, be it industry, everywhere, wherever you talk about, these things have started coming in. And then came slowly the first version of the internet. And then came what we call the websites. I'm sure the website was a very big deal at one point in time, and today nobody even talks about a website. Just want to when I say nobody talks about website, nobody treats it as a technology. They just see it as a simple service. And things like ChatGPT today can create the content of the website. If you just speak to it for 5 minutes saying that this is my objective of my company, give me a website. And it gives the entire content of the website. It's like simply amazing to see what kind of things are capable today. Now, the inception stage that we talked about in terms of governance was started with websites. And slowly came the second, where they started creating what we call the online information services. And I still remember when we wrote the first document in 1998, 97, 98 for the state of Andhra Pradesh, erstwhile state of combined Andhra Pradesh, under the leadership of Chandrababu Naidu on Vision 2020 as a part of CMC's participation into 2020, when I was one of the consultants to that core team. We remember essentially talking about giving information online, and that was the first time the word portal was introduced. And these portals were essentially to provide multitudinal, aspects of web pages. And these were filled, non-dynamic, static, but then that itself was a wonder that you click on something and say, like you want to know, let's say the RTA, the Road Transport Authority, it would just say, you do this, you can apply for a license. You have not got a license. Please understand. We are just talking about providing information that, yes, you can get your license. And we used to feel thrilled. And then from there came the third wave, which we call the e-governance wave, where even the what we call the remnants of the entire work in the form of e-sevas that we see today is a part of the e-governance, where online web-based applications, multiple technologies, multiple initiatives, multiple pilots, and multiple solutions, multiple verticals, multiple ministries, departments, each of them getting the thrust to get online was the major wave that came in. Then came the smart governance. Now, this is one area where they started looking at how do we get integrated pieces into what we are doing. Now, there is something that's happening on the payment side. There is something that is happening on the transaction side. There is something that is happening on the information side. There is something that is happening on the infrastructure side. Now, and there is something that is happening in terms of sensors. Now, is there a way that we can bring these things together, play around, and come up with a governance method where the efficiencies have been the most important thing? So if you see the transitions at the inception stage, it was mere information. Then came during the good governance, where they were talking about providing more than information. There was a certain degree of transparency that was the focus. When it came to e-governance, it was more to do with accountability, transaction capability. And when it came to smart governance, it came into efficiencies and integrations. And then now we are going through what we call the fifth wave of the connected governance, where we talk about creating a governance level. If you see the level, information was just on a small department. Then it became probably an institution-centric. Then it became multi-institutional. Then became organizational and interoperable. Then now we are talking about a government completely connected, that typically we say this, in a very, very what I call jocular manner, that if I push the switch here, I can see the light glowing out there in some other department, which means I have created the linkages across the system as to what can be the consequence of it. Some of them are so goddamn powerful that today I will be in a position to understand the impact of a benefit delivered to the extent of whether the beneficiary is himself moving up the value chain as he gets more and more benefits. That's the degree of connected governance that we are talking about. Today we talk about just not about connectivity and interoperability. We are talking about public infrastructure. The new game that we are talking about is the data infrastructure that we are trying to create. We are talking about creating the warehouses. We are talking about creating the data centers, which are public in nature and which are owned by the government to be servicing anybody's requirements. Localization of data. Then we are also talking about inclusion as an extremely powerful framework, where we have this very interesting wave that you have the cloud on the top and you have the little drop at the bottom in the form of a mobile. Just see how beautiful it is. I have the mobile, which is a drop of water. I have the cloud, which is the ocean of information. And you are connected on these two extreme ends. And in this extreme connected context that we are looking at, we talk about the role and play of governance. And how do we get into this context? And what does it mean when governance is moving like this? And when analytics has been moving like this, right? Where do they handshake? Essentially, that's the intersection point that we are trying to really explore. Because what happens is, when we are talking about such a very interesting what we call seeding of ideation from technology, from business into a transparent, accountable, efficient, connected governance, it's very, very important to see the convergences. And that's the reason why I took a little bit of a time in bringing the context of what we mean when we talk about how technology adoption in governance is very, very significant, and how the trending of the technologies, even in analytics as a space, are going to shake hands. Okay, let me just get to this is a very, very simple, extremely simple, what I call slide. But then it's important that the slide gives certain insights. Now, we are talking here about limited data, single source, limited data types, less descriptive, standard reporting, structured visualization, limited tool base, largely statistical, limited device play. This is where we were with reference to analytics or decision-making in governance. You can see that I mean, we do projects globally, and when we do projects globally, we find that there are several countries that are still at this level that we are talking about, where their infrastructure in terms of technology is minimal, their understanding of many of the solutions is minimal. I just want to share with you. It's interesting. Even in India, even in solutions that some of the governments participate in, are also very nascent. What do I mean by this? There was a project that I've been reading recently in terms of its conceptualization, and this is about climate change, and this is about environmental sustainability and um, reporting on climate change. You will not believe the project had something that I remember doing in the 1980s. And that was the terms of reference. They said we need simple forms in which we enter data manually. And then this data, we will put it into a consolidated database. And then we bring the reports out of it. Mind you, I'm talking about the tender that is as old as 2 weeks. And this is really surprising. On the other side, we seem to be running with projects in the same nation where we are talking about large data, multiple sources. The other day, I remember reading that Ayushman Bharat has something like 60 different applications that have been brought together for interoperability. And the data consistency is at the highest level of building what we call national level registries of resources, manpower, so on and so forth. Now, that's one extreme that we have, and this is the other extreme that we have. And in all these cases, you find that very interestingly, there are two distinctly wide decision-making practices. One with limited appreciation, one with an unlimited scope to play. So when we are talking about yesterday and today, we see very clearly that we are talking about large data, multiple types of data, configurable visualization. This is something that has been a very interesting thing that has started growing in the last 1 decade. That means if I want to see something, previously I used to have just 1 or 2 types of charts. I mean, all of us are aware, if you were to get into Excel, you'll have few charts. You have a line chart, you have a bar chart, you have a pie chart, or you have a stacked bar chart, so on and so forth. And that's where life is. And when the data is brought into the program context, these charts are frozen. You cannot do anything with it. You can't do any jugglery with the visualization part of it. And you had tools which just allowed you to create them and not on the wire change them. But whereas now we see that I can change my visualization as and how I want. And that's what the businesses have taught us, that quicker the visualization, the faster is the decision making, and ad hoc reporting along with a configurable visualization seem to be a very, very powerful decision making tool. That's interesting. And then comes somebody. Yeah, should I hold on for a minute? If there is some question somewhere or some contribution. All right. So now I get into what I see as the multi-device play. So that's what I was talking about, from the cloud to the mobile, from the ocean to the drop. That's a phenomenal change that has happened even in decision making. I have been talking to several corporates which talk about going to a meeting, a board meeting, where if I can have on the mobile the metrics on performance as a board director, before I attend the meeting, by the time I get into my car and drive down to the corporate office, usually it's a 30-minute drive, I would love to have a mobile analytics connect, which can just give me a few, indicators, and I'm in a position to actually raise the right kind of questions. This is the degree of usage of decision making currently in the industry. And this is something that's also flowing rather quickly even into governance. And I can say this much, that over a period of time, I think in the last 1 decade, India has, grown in leaps and bounds in adopting technology into governance. But before we go more into that, I just wanted to just bring a simple variation. And there is an interesting word around which I think the rest of our conversation will actually move on. Yeah. Any questions at this point? Please, if there is anything, I also need a break for a few seconds so that I can sip a little bit of water while you raise a question.
Not a question really, but
Okay.
I like this the cloud and the drop and the wireless connection. That is a wonderful way of looking at it. There is so much of information in the cloud like water, and just
Correct.
a small mobile. It is how best that we can use that
Correct.
is the most important thing. Good.
Absolutely. 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 And sometimes when you have a downpour, most of the water goes to the gutters, not onto the soil. So even an information overload in any system, I presume, is another challenge that we go through when we are trying to go through this analysis and the analytics that we are talking about. I have a friend's company recently I came across, and this guy had a very interesting usage. He says, we are trying to identify the needle in the haystack, which is very much like an overloaded, bearing information, and just a needle which gives you an insight of what it is. So that's the point. Okay, coming back to the decision making context that we are talking about. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, where are we? What we are doing now, and what we mean, where we would like to go. So let's say, for example, what did yesterday talk about? All of us know this. Can I have a report that told me what happened? That is, how many patients were treated for malaria? Simple question, simple answer. There's a large spreadsheet, area-wise, district-wise, probably locality-wise or hospital-wise. Like any wise that you would like to look at, you have the information available, and it is essentially the mindset of governance was reactive, meaning you give me the data, then I will think as to what can be done and mostly take corrective measures. There's nothing else that I could have done, or I didn't think beyond that. That would be the yesterday framework. Today, most of the governance frameworks, not only government, but also businesses, are talking about a proactive framework. This also we all know. Can I have the report that tells me what to do ahead? So that there is a kind of a indication that I have that, okay, this is what I have to do. So one of the responses that we have is, what is the demand for specific medicines? So let's say I have a pharmacy in every one of the Basti Davakhanas or the PHCs. There, I would like to know what kind of medicines I have to stock. What is my purchase mechanism? What is my drug movement mechanism? What is my consumption pattern? What is my expiry pattern? What can I do proactively? Let's say, for example, if I see that because of some reason, some part of the state has a higher consumption of probably, any of these medicines that have to do with hypertension, then stocking a lot more of blood pressure related medicines in that area is more important. Let's say there is another area where there is a burst of pollen all the time, which gives a lot of allergies, then antihistamine being made available in those PHCs ahead of time. I mean, these are things that we can do based on the data that we have collected, and we can come up with certain trending that happens. Now, these two are more or less well beaten to death ideas, both reactive and proactive. And the third is what we are now talking about. That's the tomorrow. Can I have the report that tells me what could happen? That would be in the form of an impact. So if I do something in the existing system beyond the call of my current systems, and I'm doing something above it with this as a data, then what is its impact and what would it mean to me? That's what is the governance that we are talking about as tomorrow's governance tool set. Now, what do I mean by this? Can anybody, open up the conversation when I say this? And how is it so distinctly different from the reactive and the proactive frameworks? Floor open for conversation, please. I get bored if people don't talk.
Hi, this is Rajshekhar. Sir,
Hi.
this is a very interesting, observations that you brought along. Another dimension which I just want to add and see, because for the tomorrow, I think the social media is playing a very vital role
Yes.
in helping and then making the governance. For example, all our leaders, particularly, the government, Prime Minister and his office and others are also very actively participating. And in fact, some of the companies, CEOs themselves also keep watching the social media, and then they kind of take up the feedback coming from the ground and immediately act on it.
Rajshekhar, I
This
have
is
a
the
very
impact.
interesting. I would just want to hold this conversation for a minute. How do you think that this is not a proactive behavior, and how is it that it is an impactful behavior?
Okay, it is impacting because by just looking at one case, they are trying to make sure that all such cases are being looked at it immediately, and if there are supposed to be corrective measures needs to be taken up, they are doing it including the procedures, processes, formats, everything that is being done. Only when they see that impact. I mean, it's not being. They could not visualize that, so that's why I'm not calling it as proactive, but it is more of impactful.
Okay.
If you can visualize, then maybe it can be proactive. But there will be some dimensions which you cannot visualize while you are designing a system. That's a general issue with an IT system because you are not the user directly.
Correct. But then I would want to just step a little further the conversation and try to, give my thoughts a little interestingly. See, I want to bring the differentiation a little more sharp. Let's say, for example, I have all the data sets because we are all fairly technical in our presence. We have a lot of data sets. From the data sets, I can do certain inferences. Now, this data set that we are talking about is with reference to a certain sectorial data. Agreed? Now, from this sectoral data, if I have a data set that is completely outside this sectoral data, and if I bring that data set into the analysis here, I interestingly start finding impacts which are different. So what do I mean by this? Let's say, for example, I am having a lot of information about dialysis that is happening in certain areas. Now, I am doing my planning for the next 5 years for my Ministry of Health. Now, the government says we need to establish 20 more hospitals. Now, which hospital, what specialty, and where? Okay. Answer is simple. Why? You have the data. You know that I would like to have a nephrology hospital in Kandukur, constituency, because currently nothing like that is happening. Currently it happens because, Purandareshwari wants that hospital there. It is not happening because there is data and there is knowledge or there is an insight. But then let us assume that we all become a mature democracy and we use data and we use information and we use insights to come to those kind of conclusions. It's very, very important that this heat map of disease distribution will actually tell you that this is the place where you should have the hospital. Now comes the interesting governance question. Assuming I put that hospital there, what is the impact of it on one, transportation, two, housing, three, infrastructure in terms of water, sanitation, garbage, etc. Four, what is its impact in terms of institutions that have to be put around it to support the human capital that is required to run it? Now, this is a different governance altogether that you're talking.
Absolutely. Yeah. These are two dimensions. I mean, you are also trying to create another dimension using both of them, not from one or the other. You know,
Correct.
that's the kind of approach you are
Correct.
taking. It's
So,
very,
so
very
when we
nice.
talk about the future, please understand this is what essentially at a linguistic level ChatGPT has been doing. It's at a linguistic level. We are not talking about an inference level, knowledge level. We are talking about at a linguistic level. Imagine a parallel that we draw in terms of analytics, that an analytics of A and an analytics of B have a cross-pollinating impact on each other. And that is where the decisions that you make are the most appropriate decisions. And they are, one, future-proof. What is the purpose of all this? Let's assume, why tomorrow? Because you want to make today future-proof.
Right.
That's the purpose, correct? And therefore, it's extremely important that we just not talk about the decision-making in governance just as a reactive and a proactive decision-making, but we also talk about an impactful decision-making, right? The only difference between business and government starts here. Between governance and business, business does not look for impact. Business looks for profitability. And business also has this enormous comfort of being unisectoral. You don't need to be multisectoral. Governance has to be multisectoral because what you do here will certainly have its impact somewhere else. Yes?
Yeah.
And that is where I think the crucial fundamental framework that we are talking about in terms of what is the relevance of analytics in decision making in governance. That's where we are. Now let's just take a look at this.
Yes.
How different is it?
Sir, before
Let's
we
look at some
proceed,
very simple differences. Yes, Mr. Chakravarti, yes.
I have a question
Please.
before we proceed to the tomorrow. The slide 4 or 5, I believe, before this to this, you have clearly given, yeah, this one. Here, you have narrated about how we were and how we are today.
Even here.
Yesterday to today. And one of the things that you have highlighted in the next slide, fifth slide, is configurable visualization, and something that is giving more insights and giving a lot of dimensions to the existing data with the feasibility of a person looking the same with a little extra bit of configuration or whatever it is.
Okay.
Now, if I understand you correctly, I am visualizing whatever we are today are more like in terms of declarative dimension rather than being the imperative dimensions. The reason of my justification is, as you rightly said, an example of a hospital. What would happen is something that what are the most energy is getting invested, rather how is something that I would want to have tomorrow, which I believe a kind of a imperative focus. As you rightly said, business is profit motto, organizations, and government is not a profit motto, but bottom line, they're also profit motto because they have to increase their budget every year.
Yeah.
Some percent of some things or not.
Correct.
So that's also a business for me. Keeping
Perfect.
my perspective separately.
Agreed.
How do you think this? Are we still going to tomorrow only in a declarative way, or is there a way that we can change our thought process to imperative way?
Okay. I think it's a very interesting question. Very, very interesting question. When we are talking about the transition from today to tomorrow in the government space, the first thing that the governments are trying to cope with is even understanding its implication. So a couple of slides down, I will just show you how governments have started looking at this entire thing from a different way. Okay, then I think we may actually bridge this question. We'll come back to this question. But to give a quick response to the question that you've raised, I feel that governments will essentially look at themselves as not necessarily profit making. There is an equivalent word that comes and which is very sensible, is sustainable. All your efforts of the government from the regulatory framework, they go more towards sustainable frameworks. And all the governance and analytics that we are trying to talk about will push us into figuring out, are we sustainable? Are we sustainable? And sustainable is a very big word. It is just not about economically sustainable or, just in terms of business sustainability, which is effectively profit making. If you just take the subset of sustainability in the business context, it's profitability. But when you talk about governance, which is the larger umbrella where business also coexist in it, there, I think sustainability is the direction in which it goes. That's my reading. And for all this, I think one of the ideas that Rajshekhar has been talking about in this conversation, where social media will play a very important role, because there is a inclusive and a collaborative, framework. And that's where actually information, regulation, sustainability, insight, and all these, when you churn together, you get certain kind of impact over the future. You can see that. And I think that's the fifth dimension that comes out in this context. That's at least how I am perceiving the transitioning over the next 10 years. We will see these things coming in.
Thank you, sir. Please, sorry for bothering you. Please carry on.
No problem. I would love to have such a conversation. I'm not into the pedagogy of anything. I'm just putting a few slides to share what I know. So I'm happy actually with more a conversation rather than a one direction kind of a lecturing mode. Anyway, so I come back to this particular thing where we are talking about how are we different. It's very close to what we have been speaking. Primarily, we are multi-sector, unlike businesses that are focused on their single sector. The second thing that we also have when we are talking about governance is we are non-standard in every possible way. Because every ministry, every department, every section in the department has its own way of looking at data, has its own standards, which they call standards, but which are otherwise non-standards. And then you also have incomplete data sets, and which is based on minimal to complete technologies. So you will find this very, very interesting. So it's a plethora of technologies, plethora of data sets, plethora of inconsistent, incomplete data available in the system. But let's take, for example, you take a business entity like Walmart. I don't think you have this as a problem with them, because they are not, to start with, multi-institutional. Second, unless there is an SOP and a document and a structure and a standard, that fellow will not even implement a process or a function in his organization. You tell me one place where you have an identical form for the same kind of data between two departments in the same ministry. Doesn't exist, or barely exists. If I say doesn't exist, it looks a little, too scathing a comment that I'm making, but then I presume that that's where we are. Then, in terms of analysis, again, just to recap what we have spoken, Chakravarti Garu, is that analysis is driven by ROI, but government never looks at ROI. If you really look at ROI, making one more statement, I don't think today we would be borrowing so much for the state of Telangana, and at the same time spending so much towards our irrigation projects, where the white papers from the new government seem to be, stunning us with the kind of insights that are coming out. So which means the government never looks at ROI to start with. And it is more quantitative in impact measurement. What do I mean by that? Let's say if I am giving a benefit in terms of education, we are not really looking at what is the improvement in the quality of education. We are essentially talking about last year we gave 20,000 slates. This year we have given 22,400 slates. There is a 16.324% improvement. This is what we understand as quantitative measurement of impact. We do not see anything else. Whereas businesses have a different reason to see that, because they may have or they may lose the competitive advantage that they have in the market if they are not open to it. So, which means ROI, plain and simple vanilla ROI as profitability, is just not what the businesses look. They look beyond that. Whereas government neither looks at ROI as plain vanilla, nor does it understand the qualitative aspects of impact. So we lose on both sides. So that's something that is very typical about governments, and we need to be learning more about it. And mostly soft and proxy indicators than hard numbers and direct data. This is another problem that we have. So if you'll be surprised. We are 75 years into an independent nation, yet we have no repositories of all the services that are offered by the government and its manpower, or a sector which is partly organized like that of the farmers. We hardly have any data. We just have soft data. What do I mean by that? Can you do a credit analysis on a farmer? The answer is more or less no. But then can I do it? Yes. How do I do it? I'll say how many bullocks that he has, how many acres of land that he has, how many times he has, probably defaulted, or how many times he has availed a loan waiver. I'm having all proxies. They're all soft. Or how many does he have a cycle, bicycle? How many electrical bulbs that he has in his house? Does he have a toilet which is constructed fully? So, I'm using indicators proxy to understand the data quality, and I don't have anything else. But whereas businesses don't ever operate like that. They have very, very accurate data, or whether they do sampling, whether they do surveys, whatever they do, they pull this data in a different way. And therefore, their analytics have a lot more serious meaning than working with non-standard solution stacks. This is another very, very interesting problem that you will have. This seems to be a problem both in terms of the government as well as the non-governmental situations, but more in the non-governmental situation. What do I mean by non-standard solution stack? I just think that I have to solve a problem as a collector of a district. Then I know in that particular district, there is a smart boy whom I want to encourage. And neither the boy knows what are the implications of scale nor of anything of tomorrow. He just addresses the problem and he uses technology that he knows and builds the solution that he understands. And eventually that is shown as a POC and it is scaled up. Now, if such initiatives happen in the 600 odd districts that we have, and at least assuming 80% of our collectors are proactive, you will have every month 600 to 800 or every 6 months solutions popping up. And they're so non-standard, there is no way that you can ever bring them together, but each of them has a spark of, some interesting functionality that it addresses. Now, bringing them together is not an easy thing. And assuming bringing the data out of it, figuring the information out of it, seeing if there is any intelligent correlation between the elements of the data there, and finding out an insight of it, and looking at if there is an impactful consequence that can be predicted out of it. Just imagine how complex this problem gets as we tackle the actual issue of data in a context called the governance. So with all this happening, as I just told you some time back, that this transition has happened, that from phase 1 to phase Y, from inception to connected governance, that transition actually led to this very, very interesting impact in the governance. See the kind of impact that it created. And that impact is essentially going to drive the use of analytics in governance. First, there is an increased focus on data. What do I mean by that? We're talking about volume, variety, value, rights, ownership. All this the government is talking today. Previously, nobody used to talk about it. That's the first thing that happened. Increased attention to interoperability. The moment there is a public tender that is coming up, there is a small IT department which is reviewing it, and it talks about interoperability, need for data exchanges, efforts in integration, sensitivity towards data localization. I don't want it somewhere else. I want it well within my context. Investments into infrastructure. If you see the latest publication that was done by Nandan Nilekani, saying that we are creating digital infrastructure for the country. And he says this is the next wave that is going to hit the nation in its developmental framework. Then we are talking about adoption of new tools and solutions. We are also talking about acceptance of IT as a reliable tool. Until some point in time in government, people never thought that IT was reliable. They were always thinking that it can be manipulated, it can be managed, it cannot be controlled. Whereas today, they understand through IT, I can trace to the last T in the system. Then increased appreciation of ROI on investments, which means when we took up a project 8 years back, where there was a requirement of an investment of 15 crores, then the government just looked, 15 crores for IT? What are you talking? And then today we see the tenders that are floating to 150 crores at a state level, or at a city level. We see tenders for IT investments at 150 crores, 200 crores. There are places where they are talking about 500, 600 crores. They're talking about PPP models. Incredible kind of impact that tech has in business models. And then people started developing the comfort for quick access to detail as well as summary. They are understanding, hey, we can play with this around. We can get it very quickly. And we are also talking about increased awareness in bureaucracy. I remember Gandhi Garu knows, Prakash Rao knows, we come from slightly a generation different from the current generation, where when we were talking to the bureaucracy, most of the time people used to say, I don't know, I can't do all these things, but I don't know what it will do for the country. But today nobody says that, to the extent that every bureaucrat today carries a tab, opens it up, looks at the data, responds to the questions, even in press meets. That's the level at which the bureaucracy has moved in. And the most powerful thing, which I put it at the last, is the governance understanding its gain in both political and economic contexts. Today, if you would want any government to talk about digital transformation, they are very happy talking about it. There was a time when anybody talking about technology was a very, very difficult thing. And people used to say, without having the food, clothing, shelter for an economy, what technology are you talking? These were the kind of, counters that used to come. But just imagine in the last 5 to 7 years, how the impact has grown and how data became important. Data integrations have become important. Data localization has become important. Infrastructure and technology has become important. And seeing the value of economic value of data and the political gain of data. This is something which is transformational that you will see, which has impacted governance. As a consequence of it, what comes out is impact on governance as what you can do in terms of policy and planning. You can do better policy and you can do better planning. You can do better budgeting. You can do better distribution of resources. You can come up with identifying which are the economic drivers. You can talk about infrastructural development with regional imbalances being removed. You can do demand and supply gaps in every sector of the government, every segment of the functionality of a department within a government. You can talk about the returns on human capital investments. You can do concurrent analysis, assessments, and alignments as you find the impact on governance. All this can be done through analytics. That's the most beautiful thing that is evolving. This is what is the future that we are going to see. And let me be very, very honest with you. AI and ML is going to play one of the most significant role, because we will have data running over 15, 20 years about every aspect that I spoke here. We have tons and tons of data coming from the statistical departments of every ministry and also from the state and the center. So if you are culling out these huge data sets, then coming up with the policy and planning frameworks, budgeting frameworks, all these coming. And I think this is an interesting, application area that is going to evolve from the simple dashboards and reporting structures that we were talking so far. The simple dashboards that we talked about were like, what is the growth in this? What is the fall in this? What is the shift in this? These are the simple questions. Today, we are not going to answer those questions. We are going to answer lot more complex questions. And let me see what are the kind of examples in certain sectors of the government that we are trying to look at. So one of the sections that we're talking about is water and sanitation, housing, health, education, agriculture. And let's see what we mean by the impact of analytics. And you see this word that I'm using there, analytics for impact analysis in governance. It's a very, kind of looped kind of a word that we are talking about. What are we saying? Analytics for impact analysis in governance. That means I have water and sanitation of the government. I am doing several things in that. I am now trying to understand the impact of what I have done. And if I wish to do something in the future, what would be its impact on my economy? This is how far I am going with the new framework of governance analytics. Please understand, business analytics and governance analytics are distinctly different at this point. Impact is the key differentiator when we talk about governance analytics. And impact, in terms of sustainability, subsumes the play of profitability also. Therefore, impact analysis that we are talking in governance is going to be the key role. And here we see the impacts are of two kinds. One is a limited sectoral impact, and the other is a multi-sectoral impact that you can see. I just gave some very small examples out here. When you talk about a unisectoral impact, let's say, for example, garbage collection. Garbage collection, if you do analytics on it, impact analysis of garbage collection, you will have a certain degree of impact that you can analyze, and it is a little limited in its nature. If I go even a little further with a much tighter example as sericulture, its impact, you can see the zone of impact or the region of influence of this impact would be limited. But let's say, for example, we talk about a multi-sectoral impact, which is like development of infrastructure. Let's say road infrastructure. Road impacts transport. Transport impacts business. Business impacts trading. Trading impacts housing. Housing impacts hospitality. Hospitality impacts employment. Now you see this, this kind of chain effect that you see, which is multi-node modeling that is required in understanding these data sets and the correlation between these data sets. And that impact is what will make the system understand its own sustainability. If we do not have the right decisions taken for the right kind of impact that the decision is going to have, then to that extent, the sustainability of that particular decision will come down. So that's where we say that impact analysis is the thing that needs to be done through the analytical tools that we have in the space of governance. So let me just give you a few examples that would, essentially go about with it. I'm just checking. I'm at 5:12 now. Do I have another 10 minutes to close the session?
You have another 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes, and so that we can have quick few question and answers. Right.
Sure.
So in terms of water and sanitation, if you see impact analysis, quality of water to health hazards, where to set up the next water plant, garbage collection and energy management. You see that now there are multi dimensions that we are talking. Housing, demand and supply across segments, and environmental impacts on demand and public transport, regional disparities and wealth consolidation because of housing. These are very interesting impacts when you start analyzing this data. Then in terms of health, beds, hospitals, doctors, facilities, all of them resulting in what we call a health security system that you need to create. Then major trending of diseases over the next 5 years. Associated setting up of pharma SEZs, human capital with focus on institution building. Where do I build the nurse, education centers or training centers? How many nurses do I need to plan for the next 15 years? What kind of reconstruction of educational curriculum that I have to do in order to get there? Let's just see how this analytics is working, which is completely different, where we are talking about analytics for policy making, analytics for planning, which is very, very different from what we talk about in terms of analytics for return on investment. Then again, some examples that we are talking about is literacy to change the quality of life. What do I mean by when education happens, how does it impact my quality of life? How does research give me my competitive advantage? How does my employment result in higher skill development? How sanitation and education, gender and equality are related to the overall development of my economy? They all come under education if you just look at it as a standard data. And mind you, there are so many dashboards that are already available for each one of them separately with data sets that just give data about what is the literacy level in this particular geographical area. What is the quality of living that you are having under certain proxy quality indicators. But this data set in conjunction with the other data set and its implication to governance is yet to be made available. And such a information is what is going to determine what are the future decisions that the government has to take in order to bring a sustainable growth for that particular economy becomes the foundation. And this is where I think analytics as a technology tool is going to play a very significant role. And similarly, let's take agriculture, import substitution, circular economy, global supply chain to production, food security and nutritional security, transport and cold chains. Now, you see that this example that I talked about, where we are talking about transport and business, you suddenly find you create this infrastructure, then immediately these cold chains start coming in. The faster the movement, the greater the cold chain network that you have, cold storage chain network that you have, you will realize that the entire system is working differently. The impacts are different. The per capita profitability gain, starting from the producer to the consumer, they completely change. And this is a part of the impact analysis of a decision that we make based on data sets that are using the analytic tools to determine it. And I think that is the primary principle of governance analytics. So when we talk about something as powerful as this, obviously you would like to have a technology or a technology framework that essentially has slightly a different set of requirements. One is that we cannot no longer live with static data models, but we need to have a lot of dynamism in our data models, and the tool sets that are built by the large organizations should and will consider dynamic data models becoming the basis for tomorrow. And I'm sure already when we talk about NoSQL or we talk about unstructured databases that we're talking about, text-based, structured, unstructured. All these are essentially moving more and more and more towards dynamic data models rather than the static data models. And we are also trying to look at not having columnar restrictions or row-wise restrictions or normalization-wise restrictions, which constrain the entire linkages into the data structures. So I think that's one major thing that you will see that will come up as one of the interesting features. A multimodal of all forms of data, then managing petabytes of data. I mean, just imagine that we are talking about Ayushman Bharat and UPI. I think just these two examples are enough to tell us what kind of data we are talking about and what kind of applications that we are talking about and what kind of consequences that can come out of it. If you have an Ayushman Bharat which talks about what is the usage of a drug delivery in a pharmacy in one of the wards of one of the towns in a particular district of a particular state, and the payment gateway's behavior in association with what is happening in that particular pharmacy. Just see the linkages that it will bring out. What kind of, consequential, impactful decisions that can come out. Similarly, real-time responsive. Most of the time, we have been always seeing this space of governance as not as real-time. It is always post-facto. That's where I think the data warehouses were playing a very significant role, where you give a star schema based query. The query runs on the huge data for a pretty long time and then throws the data solution onto the table. But here we are talking about a connected context of governance where the responses on the query, the responses of the impact of what we intend doing is in real time and needing to be preemptive. Now we will also find that until yesterday, you just needed extremely simple computational capabilities. That's where most of the analytics were. Now the analytics are moving into two very, 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 very important areas. One is the algorithmic approach and the scenario correlation approach. Now, when we are talking about this algorithmic approach, what I mean is the way we have had, greater than, less than, equal to, we have stacks of algorithms that are available, which we pull out, we run on it, and it just gives you the response. And more the algorithms drive, or the kind of like the wizards that we have algorithms, and these algorithms, when we are talking about impact as one of the key drivers, then the algorithm will take a different shape altogether and they perform and deliver. Having this kind of flexible, pluggable algorithmic set and scenario analysis for correlations is what is going to make all the difference, along with the 24/7 access across platforms and devices. I think this is kind of tomorrow's impact analysis framework that's going to be supporting the governance. Now, just to bring in the tech elements, you will see that from data sourcing all the way until insight management, you will see that there are so many different new features that would be on demand. Like, for example, 2 to 3 seconds for 1 billion record transaction. This is one of them, which will be one of the most important requirements, which will become like it's given. That's the kind of response people will give. It's just a matter of time. Similarly, when we talk about it's an algorithmic based insight, I have a pluggable learning model. Most of them are available today at an entry level, but then you will figure it out that these things will become more and more and more what we call ubiquitous in their presence and in their depth of their knowledge that they can provide to the consumer. And similarly, we are no longer talking about managing data and all these things. They do not anymore become important things. We talk about self-servicing. Mostly it is self-servicing because everybody is competent to understand what to ask as a question. And everybody is capable of asking that kind of question, which is of consequence for the work that he is doing. So it starts creating scenarios, and that is what we call the models around which this entire impact analysis in governance and the tech elements will come together to play and give the results. Now, just to give you, I'll take less than probably another 2 minutes to close the conversation. That is the relevance of analytics in governance, a quick case study. This is what is proposed in the health sector by us. Next Health Digital Solutions does very significant work, conceptual frameworks in terms of connected digital healthcare. And in this case, we talk about what we call the National Health Intelligence Center, which is nothing but a governance framework for health sector with impact analysis of what is happening on health. So we use a very interesting word, which we call health security. So what is health security? Like, for example, border security, food security, nutritional security. We talk about health security, which means that I know what I need to do to keep my people healthy all the time, and I give them the security that they are healthy. And this cannot just happen just because you have hospitals and you have HIMS systems running over the place. You need to have an intelligence mechanism which actually derives this as the impact on the analysis of what we are doing. So that's where essentially the National Health Intelligence Center is what we talk about. And we augment it with what we call the second level command and coordination control centers, the CCCs, which essentially pump in the real-time information to the intelligence center, and the intelligence center churns out the required impact analysis for the government, which becomes the basis for meeting the SDGs that are specific for the UN Millennium. That's the larger context in which the Connected Digital Health National Health Intelligence Center focuses. And now, just to quickly give you the command and control centers, how they collect the information from various contexts, and then they publish them out as dashboards with abilities of a different nature. Then comes the National Health Intelligence Center, which essentially enables policy and planning on real-time data, integrated into GIS, integrated into all aspects of what we see as the future of analytics in governance. So this is what we do for a living, and that's the conceptual understanding that I could share from whatever that we learned over the last probably 5 to 7 years. So thank you very much. Any questions? Kindly open the conversation.
This is a deep dive that you touched, the ton of questions that I have, but I'm really not sure where do I start. But keeping my questions separate, keeping my thoughts separate, I have to put them first myself so that I can bring it to you. But you did a very excellent job in putting a platter of things in front of me. I don't know what to start with. And this is really insane. You're not supposed to do like that. You're supposed to give us one thing and we eat it, chew it, and then you give us 2 more things. But really good, sir. Thank you for your thoughts are wide because of your experience, I believe, because of your knowledge. I'm not able to come up with the speed of your thoughts, but you're inspired me a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think there is one area which I would like to, really ask most of our people, whoever is present, to start reflecting on where do we measure impact using analytics. In one line, if you ask me, what should I take back from this conversation and mull over, it's this. And if you have to do that, what kind of a tool set that needs to be made available as a product platform or a product framework or as even a methodology? Let's not go that far. I may not be in a position to bring a product today because of so many challenges of technology, but I can give a methodology into this madness. Right? So that's some thought that you can take home, if I may say.
I have a viewpoint here. Now,
Please, sir.
it is, I mean, if we start thinking about it, it will be like a science fiction movie.
That's how technology comes in always.
Yes.
It starts
Now,
with fiction and it becomes science.
it becomes science. Now, we can only build on what we have done day before yesterday and yesterday, and we can start slowly progressing. As you rightly pointed out some time back, 10 years ago, a collector, if we ask them about IT, if we inform them about what can be done, then they were very hesitant. But today, they are very tech savvy. Similarly, the people, the young generation, they are very tech savvy in using mobiles, in looking at the data, in choosing what they want, and building on that. Probably in the next 5 years, people can realize what can be the impact. One thing is about, for your question, what impact people can start searching in their own activities, not necessarily for the entire world, not necessarily for the health sector. In my own work, how can be it impactful? I can do this, so I can improve. And if everybody improves, the overall things will
System
improve
improves.
automatically.
Agreed. Certainly.
No, I think you are brought out very good point, Gandhi Garu, because today's generation, they take many decisions only looking at data more than us, earlier generations, because being more tech savvy. Even if they have to go to a movie, they first look at the reviews of their generations, their peers, who liked it, who did not like it, why they liked it. It's right from that angle, multiple dimensions they see and then take it up. Even if they have to buy a car, let's just say, for everything, a normal citizen is actually doing a lot of analytics, to say so, to take any decision. Not only the government or big corporates, but even a regular citizen in a daily life, they are doing a lot of this kind of analytics. So the role of analytics is going to exponentially improve and become more impactful because of this kind of usage. So it's the matter of, I think, if as a community of IT, if we can visualize some of these exponential usages and bring that ecosystem, live, then we would have done our job well. That's what I felt. But on that note, I will say that sir has presented really. Mr. Subramanian has done a great job in providing the impact and the proactiveness of analytics and their combination. How it will be very effective. I really like that idea. Thank you, sir.
I have a small question, Gandhi Garu. You're able to hear me?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you. But why are you questioning me? We should all question Subbu.
One thing I want to compliment YS for this excellent presentation. We missed you on the 9th of December, sir.
My apologies, sir. I was not in the country at that time, as you're aware.
Okay. We can understand that. But what I want to tell you is that take one more session on the case study.
Sure. One of these days we'll schedule that, and I can share what is it that we are doing and what is it that we are actually trying to solve as a problem. I think that would be an interesting thing to even share with.
Can you go to the slide number 3, please?
Oh, sure. I stopped sharing, but let me.
No, slide 3 has small clarification, not a question. Clarification. There's a slide on the stages of slide 3, sir.
Yes. Sir.
You talked about that.
Yes, I'm coming there. Can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we are able to see.
Slide 3.
This one.
Inception, good governance, e-governance. I think more or less we are stuck at e-governance today. Am I right?
We are moving closer to smart governance.
No. E-governance, I talk about mostly e-sevas where you payment gateways, I can apply
Correct.
for some record certificate, all that is going on smoothly.
Correct.
But when it comes to next two stages, smart and
Yes.
connected governance, my opinion, I maybe you can correct me. What time frame you see that it will go from e-governance to connected governance? Question one is that.
Yeah.
Question two is, when you want to go to smart and connected, the people who are getting it done are to be involved. When you say people means the political leaders and the government bureaucracy and servants. How do you see that they are motivated toward this?
Correct.
Because
I think,
when you do this, they have a lot of hidden agenda which could be not possible with these things today.
correct. I think what you're saying is very right. See, there are two places where the smart governance and connected governance throw a lot of challenge. One is the transparency that it can enforce, which is not a very comfortable option for many of the vested interests in any system. It's not just only in India. I have seen global context. Globally, it is the same. I think fundamentally human being is the same. His biology, biochemistry is the same. And therefore, his behavior is also the same, collectively or individually. So that was taken into consideration. The time scale that I see from e-governance to connected governance is probably not beyond 5 to 7 years. In the next 5 to 7 years, there is going to be a sea change that's going to hit all of us. And that is getting prompted by what we call an inclusive behavior of the barriers that are falling between the citizen and the government because of technology seeping in. You can stop for a day, you can stop for 2 days, 3 days, but when the backlash happens, all that gets covered and you will leapfrog. So that's what means the trending that we have seen globally, not just in India, which means that I would give a prediction of 5 to 7 years for it to move into connected governance. Connected governance also has dependency on public infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure. And today, we are very, very lucky living in a nation like India, where the cost of connectivity and digital infrastructure is, like literally coming down, like exponentially coming down. But whereas there are many countries where it is not so true. And therefore, the ubiquitous nature of this connected governance across various, countries is going to take a little time. So that's the answer for the first question that I have. The second question, the answer that I have is the jump from e-governance to smart governance, unless you have digital inclusion. You see in this, there is supporting digitally inclusion. Inclusion is the most important differentiator between e-governance and smart governance. So inclusion will start the moment you are seeing applications like UPI becoming ubiquitous. That's the first level of inclusion. Then comes the second, then comes the third, fourth. Slowly we will start moving. And a time will come when every individual is connected to some application or the other for his daily interactions with the government. There'll be some interaction or the other in some context or the other. That will happen through his very mobile or his own device or his own context of connectivity. So that's the second thing that's happening. As you rightly said, unless there is an inclusion, the shift from e-governance to smart governance does not happen. If you take the indicator of most of the developed nations, they are all very clear in their indication that one of the indicators that tells that you are on a better governance is when you have a higher level of inclusion of citizens into the collective governance process and the decision-making of policy in the governance process. Then comes the third. Connected governance will certainly take time because connected governance talks about a lot more of standardization, interoperability, and scale and replicability. These are not all that easy and they take time. And my estimate is connected governance, which is not only driving efficiency and transparency, but also inclusive and innovative, will be probably a decade away. That's my timeline, and that's
Thank you,
the
sir.